Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning in today. I got an awesome episode for you. But before I present the guest, as always, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review the show. It helps boost the podcast, grow the audience, and ultimately helps me get the best guests for you guys and make the show the best show it can be. Additionally, please go follow me on social media, ROYBTZ on Instagram and ROY_BNTZ on Twitter. On Twitter, you can subscribe to my newsletter, which gives you access to updates, occasional blog posts, news about guests, and the future of the show. And most importantly, you can get the podcast conveniently in your inbox week in and week out. Finally, please consider supporting this independent podcast. I made the decision not to work with any sponsors on the podcast. I want it to be completely independent as of right now. So any support of this podcast would be greatly appreciated. And final thing, if you want to start your own podcast, I have a full tutorial that covers everything you need to know, soup to nuts, A to Z, how to start, market, execute, reach out to guests, everything you need to know about starting a podcast, growing a podcast is in this ebook. It's 104 pages of dynamite information, digestible information, and easy to follow and execute information. So if you are interested, go check that out. The information and link is in the show notes. All right, let's move on to the guest. This week I have Jost Kobusch. Jost is a mountaineer, an outdoorsman, and is attempting something that's never been done. And I applaud that. It's always interesting to see people look at things in different ways and say, how can we do this differently? How can we do our own thing? How can we carve our own path in this niche and grow? And I think that's cool. So especially when they dedicate their lives to their craft, I think that's commendable. And Jost is definitely in that group of people. We talked a lot about Everest, about what the average climber does in Everest, meaning using Sherpas and everything else, and what he's doing, and especially as far as the routes, that the typical routes that the average person climbing Everest does and what he's doing. We talked about going to Alaska and climbing, doing mountains that have yet to be climbed, his beef with Messner, or I guess Messner's issue with Jost and why he has that issue and how Jost feels about it. I think the most interesting part for me was just the mindset that he takes with him into the mountains, because for the most part he does these solo climbs completely by himself. So the mindset that you need to have when you're in those elements, in the highest peaks of the world. And I think that's something that really spoke to me. I think it's going to speak to you as well and maybe inspire you to go climb your own mountain, either physically or metaphorically. Anyway, let me introduce this week's guest, Jost Kobusch. Enjoy the episode, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Jost, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, man. I moved to Colorado a few months ago. I've always had this sense of adventure in me, but the last roughly 7 years, I lived in New York, and it was hard to get out and kind of live the type of lifestyle that I want to live. And now that I'm in Colorado, I'm definitely, it's paying dividends. I'm living all the things. I'm like doing 3 times what everyone else is kind of doing out here as far as like outdoor stuff. So I'm finally doing that. So I'm always happy to talk to someone about being in the outdoors, adventure, and all that good stuff. All right.
Cool.
What, maybe tell people a little bit about yourself for people who may not know you.
Ooh, I'm not a big fan of these questions, but I'll try.
Sure.
Let me think. Who am I?
Not so much who you are, but just like as far as maybe like accolades, a few things you've done, just so people can get a firm grip on, the podcast, the episode.
Okay. Okay, I was just about to like start with my childhood and everything, but
You can do that too.
I do a quick childhood thing. I grew up in a place very far away from the mountains, so I guess that's why I later on became a professional mountaineer, because they were always special to me. um, and then because I grew up so far away from the mountains, I always had issues like finding the right partners for mountaineering. And that's why I grew comfortable with lots of solo stuff. And so I did lots of solo things, like first ascents of peaks, new routes. I did a solo on Annapurna 1, which is an 8,000 meter peak. It's not the easiest 8,000er. So yeah, and then climbed lots of high unclimbed peaks solo. That's what I do.
So where did you grow up? You said you grew up far away from the mountains. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up like 2.5 hours from Amsterdam in Germany, but it's a really flat area.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised, because when I would come into Europe to ski in Austria, I would usually land in Munich and then drive into Austria. And I always thought Germany had just as much mountains or some mountains, but for the most part, it's fairly flat, right? Germany?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty flat. And then you have the Alps at the very bottom in the south.
Okay. And then I guess what's the trajectory? I mean, you didn't just start Annapurna. Like what were the steps that kind of led to doing that?
I think the first step was my mindset. I guess I was always interested most in the things that I was also scared by most. I always saw them as a great way to challenge myself, to grow, to like become a better person, a better human, kind of like with more opportunities, more skills, more ways to experience life. And that started really at a young age. I think the most memorable moment is me being in primary school in the sports class, and we had swimming lessons. And in order to get like this silver swimming badge, you needed to jump from the 3 meters jump, which is like, I think, 10 feet jump, 10-foot jump. And I was standing up there, and everybody was watching, but I just couldn't do it. I was just too scared to do it. So I think that's how everything started, because then I was just like asking myself, why can't I do this? I mean, the other kids do it, so it seems safe. Nobody gets injured. Everybody survives. But what's there inside of me that doesn't allow me to do what the others do? And so I think that's where the curiosity sparked, and I began seeking out these challenges.
Did you end up jumping?
I ended up jumping, but never in that class, and only a few years later. So I never got the silver badge.
It's too bad. Well, now you do things that I'm sure 99% of the people in that class probably are too scared or just don't have the capacity to do. So you flipped it around.
Absolutely. But I also believe that talent is highly overrated, and building skill is highly, highly underrated. And that's just what I did.
Yeah, I think it was LeBron James that said that all the talent in the world amounts to nothing if there's no persistence, if there's no hard work involved. And I think that's true for anything, like any endeavor that you want to be great at. Doesn't matter if it's in business or, content creation or athleticism. Like if you don't do it day in and day out, all the talent in the world is just not going to make you the best at that category.
Yeah, talent helps, but in the end, it's all about building skill. And if you don't build skill, then you will not become the person who is able to do this challenge. So, how do I say? When I grew up at that time, you have to imagine that like the heroes that were cool in TV, they were all like superheroes, Spider-Man, like guys that just, were normal. And then suddenly they got bitten by a radioactive spider and they turned into a superhero,
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if you remember those older movies that I mean, just before my generation, the last generation, they had these heroes like Rocky, for example.
Sure.
Rocky, he got this opportunity to fight against the world champion, and he knew he wasn't ready. He knew he had to become somebody who was ready. So you see all these montages like this stuff in the movie where he trains like crazy, he's training, he's becoming somebody. And I guess when I grew up, all that stuff was missing. I thought I'm not special. I'm not Spider-Man. I didn't see this Rocky training session in my heroes when I grew up.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess tell people what you're currently working on. You have a project that you're currently working on, and it's in Everest. And from my understanding, since, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay became kind of the first people to reach the summit, I think it was 1953. From what I read, it was over 6,000 people that have already been recognized to reach the top. So a lot of people have climbed Everest. What are you exactly doing differently?
So I'm trying to avoid big masses. I'm trying to avoid people. The way I climb is seeking wilderness. It's basically a journey into the unknown. And so for me, I always wanted to climb an 8,000 meter peak solo. Mm-hmm. But then when I was trying to climb Lhotse, which is the neighbor mountain of Everest, I realized it's super busy. There are a lot of people and it's impossible to be alone. It's impossible for me to experience this wilderness I was seeking because it's like a circus. There are like queues. You have to look for your tent spot, which is marked on a campsite. It's crazy. And so I was systematically searching for a way to go solo. And what I'm doing right now on Everest is just the result of a long way. And it basically meant I figured if I go in winter, there will be nobody. It's back to wilderness. Okay, go in winter because it's extremely hard. I mean, you're facing extreme conditions. It's much colder, much windier. And then I was looking at the project and I realized if I wanted to solo, I couldn't really do the normal route. The normal route is going through the Khumbu Icefall, which is a huge mess of crevasses and glacier towers, highly unstable. In peak season, it can move up to 1.8 meters per day. Wow. So it's like, imagine it's moving like 6 feet a day. So it's like a lot of movement.
Yeah.
And in winter, you don't have the icefall doctors, which are the people that are in charge full-time of establishing a route through the icefall by installing aluminum ladders and about 3 kilometers of fixed lines, like ropes that are attached there. If I'm there in winter, nobody is there. So I can't really go there. It doesn't make sense at all. Like nobody would go there if it wasn't Everest, first of all. And then as a solo climber, I looked for options that were soloable. And the West Ridge, which is a very technical route that has never been climbed in the way I'm trying to climb it. Like it has been climbed on various occasions, but never the route I'm trying now. Seemed like the most logical decision, and also the most beautiful one.
If it's never been climbed in the way that you want to climb it, I'm assuming there's a reason, because nowadays everyone's trying to do be the first at something, right? because a lot of the big stuff's already been done, and now it's just can I do it faster? Can I do it quicker? Can I do it, in winter? Can I do it, I don't know, skiing down or something? There's always a first. Why has this not ever been climbed? What's the reason?
So you have to imagine when the West Ridge itself was climbed the first times, they actually built a cable car from the lower base of the wall to 6,000 meters to transport all the loads because the route is so technical.
Wow.
So they couldn't bring up the loads. And this is like a more traditional approach where you would go with many people. You have people only in a support team. They carry a lot of loads. Now I'm doing this without any of this infrastructure. I'm doing this carrying my own loads. I'm there by myself. I have no Sherpas, no oxygen support, and so on. But even if you would say, let's say, okay, we climb it in a team, where a team, let's say, average team size of good teams would be maybe today, like, let's say 5 people, which is already a large team by modern standards. It's not so big anymore. You would have a really, really hard time climbing that route, bringing up the gear, and then you have some really, really technical, like really difficult climbing towards the end of the route. So if you climb Everest via the normal route, it's a bit more like, let's say, snow hiking kind of. Of course, it's high altitude and it's tough.
Yeah.
But the route I do involves some rock climbing that's like partly overhanging. It involves mixed climbing, which is a combination of ice and rock. And it's like proper climbing. And so even, let's say, you make all the obstacles in the beginning, after you're ready to maybe push for the summit, you could still have bad luck with the weather. So how do I say, the route makes you kind of inflexible. It's just a really, really hard route, okay? In short, it's a fucking hard route.
And I mean, you've attempted this, right?
Yeah, sure.
How many times?
This was the second time. I just returned a few days ago from the second attempt.
Wow. And can you tell us what happened?
In the first or in the second disaster?
Both.
Okay, let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
So when I first attempted this, it was 2019, 2020. Obviously, I wasn't really sure if it's possible. I mean, as you said, there are reasons why people didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And so I was preparing this big documentary here in Germany for a big TV channel. And there was another famous mountaineer. And on camera, he was asked, how high do you think are your chances to reach the summit? And he said, I believe to reach 6,000 meters, I give him a chance of 0.1%. And this is a really experienced alpinist, much more experienced than I am.
Is this Messner?
No, it wasn't Messner. It was David Göttler, another German alpinist who climbed many 8,000 meter peaks. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, come on, David, you could have at least given me like a 1% chance.
Yeah.
But so he was like not convinced at all that I would even make it to 6,000 meters because that's how difficult the route is. Mm-hmm. And so that year, I arrived there and I was thinking about his words. Of course, I mean, it was kind of making me a bit nervous in the beginning because I thought maybe I overestimated my abilities and so on. Everybody has these moments, huh? Sure. And so when I arrived there, it was really this journey into the unknown. I was just like working the route. And I mean, I was working with material that's like 30 years old from people describing like what they've seen 30 years ago. Essentially, I did a first ascent, even though people have been there, I had like no information.
Yeah.
I managed to reach actually 7,360 meters on that attempt. So much, much higher. I think what David said was also motivating me kind of like to prove him wrong,
Yeah. And then the one that you just did?
The one that I just did, okay. The first one, I didn't have that experience and I really had to search the route. So it took a lot of time. And then again, I injured myself and I had some really bad stomach issues. So I was kind of, already overachieving. So I said, it's good until here. And then I changed my training plan for the one I just returned from. I was prepared like the best way ever. I moved to the French Alps, to Chamonix. If you like right now, during this podcast, I'm sitting in front of Mont Blanc, which is out of my window.
Wow.
And I was really strong. And so I moved up on the mountain very fast. I reached Camp 3, which I put around 6,450 meters after only 13 days of
fast.
expedition start. That was like, it took me a month longer the last time.
Yeah.
So I was prepared well.
Were you just better
fast.
acclimated?
No, I actually changed a lot in my trainings. Like, for example, I tried new methods. I did major changes, and I changed the coach, and I had a new mentor, and I used a lot of input and a lot of things that I learned on the first attempt to prepare for the second one. So I was like, and then of course I knew the route. So I was just like, bam, 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 going up.
Yeah.
After 2 pushes, I already established Camp 3, which is like amazing. So I went down and said to myself, okay, now rest a bit down, and then you're going to tackle your own record on the route. And I was like, I wanted to go up to 8,000 meters, which would be actually a new record. The highest ever achieved altitude on that route in winter, even by large teams, is around 7,500. But then again, how do I say? As I said earlier, risk is what happens when you think you've thought about everything.
Yeah.
The jet stream hit, and the jet stream hit as crazy as it hadn't before since 2006.
Wow.
So, like, we had extreme winds. When the jet stream hits the mountain, you can have like 250 km of wind speed.
Wow.
So it's crazy. Like
250.
250, yeah.
Wow. How do you even survive in 250? That's a tornado. Or like,
you don't survive. You just fly away. You don't need a paraglider to land in China.
So what do you do in that situation? You make a executive decision to just go back. Are you in contact with someone? Like, do you have, radio, like people down at the bottom, like telling you, weather conditions, or are you completely isolated? It's just you.
So I use this Garmin InReach, this little device that I can connect to my smartphone. And then basically I can use satellite internet on my smartphone to receive weather reports. And so I do have communication through that. And also in the base camp itself, I do have a cook. So if I'm down at the base camp, there is somebody there. But up the mountain, look, I have a radio, but I stopped using it because, like, what should I talk with the person on the other side? Like, there is no benefit. I use it only if there's a photographer, maybe somewhere down with a telescope shooting pictures. Yeah. And so we can talk, and he can say, okay, Jost, I want you to move or whatever. But otherwise, for me, it doesn't make any sense to carry a radio and use the radio. But the question was, what do you do? And the unspectacular answer is, you wait. You don't do anything.
I mean, that must be scary, waiting in those type of conditions at 7,000 plus meters, not knowing when it's going to end, because it can be an hour, it can be 4 days.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So I reached my high point of 6,450, like 6.5. And then I went down. And after I was down, that's when the jet stream hit. So I was in the base camp. I was like kind of safe. I mean, my base camp this year was the village next to Everest. So I did an additional 6 kilometers every time I would go up Everest. But it was much more comfortable. Now I was just worrying about the roof of the hut flying away. But in base camp, I would be worried to fly away with my tent, It was actually really crazy with the wind. yeah, I broke a lot of tents.
Dude, I can imagine. And this is like a mini version, right? Out here in Colorado, on the mountains, it gets windy. And a couple of weeks ago, I went and I did a 13. It was like 13,240 or something. But it's very windy up there. And I got there on a day that was relatively calm, but the gusts were still like 50 miles an hour gusts. Once in a while, they're just like, and you feel it. Like it feels like someone's pushing you, you know? So I can't imagine, double that height and double the winds. Man, that must be fucking scary.
Yeah. So how do I say? After waiting 2 weeks in the base camp, I got a bit tired of waiting. And I was thinking, you have been up there before. It can't be so bad. I spent so much time on this route already because it's the second go. I was maybe a bit overconfident because I was just like, I've been up there in like 80K wind and my tent didn't break and it felt fine, kind of acceptable. And I really wanted to move up. I couldn't wait to like go higher. So after these 2 weeks, I actually went up again and slept in Camp 1, which is on a rock cliff in the wall. And then I went up to Camp 2, which is a bit more exposed. It's on 6,000 meters on the so-called Lola, which is an ancient pass to Tibet. It's not used anymore because the glacier has melted away, and now it's based on an extremely technical rock route. But so on top of that saddle, I put my tent up, and it actually looked like a really nice evening. I remember thinking, oh, look, it's not so bad. Like, why didn't you go up earlier? But then at night, the wind was striking hard. Like, my tent went into various yoga positions. I didn't even know it could perform until the poles snapped and pierced the outer layer, and the whole thing just collapsed and ripped apart. And
wow.
I opened the door, like the zipper of the tent, and it was like holding my face out of the car window on the German Autobahn, like it was like I couldn't really even breathe. So like it was so windy, I was gasping for air and at the same time pulling out the poles out of the tent so that it wouldn't be like a sail and it wouldn't inflate further. And then I wrapped myself into the remaining wreck of the tent and spent the rest of the night up there.
Wow. Do you have, what's going through your mind in those moments? Are you like, why the fuck did I do this? Why did I put myself in this situation? Or are you even thinking like, oh, this could be it? Like this could be the end? Like what's going through your mind?
So, before the poles broke, I was really scared that I would fly away with the tent, and people die this way. Like there was a guy on Manaslu, it's another 8,000er, and he was in his tent, and when gusts came, they just took him away with his tent, and he like fell down the mountain inside his tent, and he died. And so I was thinking about that and using it to be focused on what I can do in order to maximize my chance of survival. I was running a checklist in my mind. It's more like, what can I do to maximize my chance of survival, and which one action can I take that has the biggest impact? Because I can't multitask in this situation. It's a full-blown crisis.
Yeah.
So better I focus on one thing. And so that was, basically securing the tent or making sure that this tent is not flying away. I wasn't thinking about temperature or whatever. My main concern was the not flying away, and I was just doing everything possible. Eventually the tent lines all snapped and I couldn't secure it further, and then it broke. But then obviously I was just running my checklist. Okay, what can I do now in order? Okay, I pull out the poles, I wrap myself in the tent sheet, and there was no time for any regret or any doubts or anything because I'm running the checklist, and that's the most efficient way to survive.
Yeah. In the morning time, though, do you I don't know, do you kind of have some doubt? Do you sit there and think to yourself, like, that was close. That was very close last night. Like, do I want to keep doing this? Is this because there is, especially in the higher elevations, like death is very close a lot of times, and a lot of people have died on a lot of these higher mountains. There's the stuff that ever crossed your mind, like, why do I need to do this? Like, I put myself in this danger. Maybe I shouldn't. Like, does that ever creep in?
When I was younger, there were more questions, definitely. And I was partly also going to the mountains to answer these questions. But then at some point, I just knew why I'm doing it. And once you know why you do it, there's no question left. Then there's just a feeling left like, cool. I mean, I never broke a tent and now I completely trashed this one. What a great experience. I learned so much from this. I will make sure it's not happening again.
Yeah. So next year, you're going to attempt this again?
2023 in December, I will start again. So technically next year, yeah.
So technically next year, 23. Wow. So what do you think? Now you have the beta, right? You have the information. You kind of know the route. I think you're pretty confident that it can be done. It's just 2 times, like for different reasons that were kind of out of your control, it didn't happen. But like, are you confident that with the right conditions and with the right training, like it can be done next year?
I'm confident with the right conditions and with the right training, it can be done.
Yeah, can.
But I'm not confident it can be done next year because I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about those 2 components next year. They're highly volatile,
How much? Because I think a lot of people may not know like too much about Everest. They've heard Everest, obviously they know the name, but like the technicality aspect of it is. So I guess before that, have you summited Everest like the normal route, that the one that everyone does?
No, I haven't.
You haven't. Are you interested at all to do that?
No.
No. Okay. So can you explain to people, I guess, why? Like, is it much more touristy feel than, or like much more? Because the Sherpas do a lot of the work, obviously. And again, like for people who may not know everything, we'll try to explain as best we can. But you're doing something completely solo. I'm assuming you have everything on your back, all the weight, all the things you're going to be using. Whereas if you're doing the normal route in the summertime with Sherpa and with a team, like it's like, what's the, I don't know, standard procedure over there? Like what's it like?
Okay. Let's say you want to climb Everest the normal way, then I would say 99% of the people climbing Everest, they have support from a Sherpa. A Sherpa is, what do I say? It's not a job title. A Sherpa is somebody who grew up in the area of Everest, in the Khumbu. Mm-hmm. There are different people, and not only Sherpas work there. There are also Tamang and Rai, which are other tribes, you could say so. I mean, if you grow up in, I don't know, New York, or you grow up in Colorado, then maybe you have the New Yorkers helping you on Everest. The Sherpas are there to support you on your climb. They will carry everything. So when you arrive in a high altitude camp, which is just a place, it's not like a campsite, there are no toilets, nothing. It's just basically a location. So once you arrive, your Sherpa will already have put up a tent, and you can just go in your tent, in your sleeping bag, and he will cook for you, a full service. You don't need to do anything. And the next day, when you go higher, he will carry most of the load, and you maybe just take your jacket, a bottle of water, and you have a relaxed, I mean, it's never really relaxed, but it's a much easier walk up. And on the way up, your Sherpa might serve you some tea, maybe he has some snacks. And it's very similar on the summit day, just that you would use oxygen. I would say, again, like 99% of the people climbing Everest use oxygen. If you use oxygen, it's not like diving. In diving, you have compressed air. If you use oxygen in high altitude, you really have a bottle of pure oxygen, which then will be mixed with outer air in your mask. But even with this pure oxygen, it's not lasting so long. You would need 2 bottles to climb on the summit day. So your Sherpa would carry 1 extra bottle for you that you can exchange. And the Sherpa itself, they are strong. They probably just go with 1 bottle.
Yeah.
And then climbing to the summit would still feel like maybe climbing at 6,500 or 7,000 meters. It depends on how much oxygen you would allow to come into your mask. I personally believe that you should not take something like oxygen. You should not adjust the environment to your ability, but the ability to the environment. And so, yeah, climbing Everest is hard. Climbing Everest with oxygen is still hard. But for me, it's a different thing to go somewhere, to experience a great view, to experience a place just for experiencing the place, or to go there for a sportive challenge where you try to adjust to the challenge, where you really prepare for the challenge and you don't use any, let's call it doping. I mean, if somebody's on the Tour de France with a tank of oxygen on his back, yeah, I think it's very much the same.
So you're in the anti-oxygen club.
I think I can totally understand why people use it, and they usually don't want to achieve the ultra performance and so on. So it's absolutely fine. And how do I say? I don't think they do it wrong. Here's the other funny thing in mountaineering, in alpinism, everybody thinks everybody else doing something wrong,
Yeah.
That's just how it is,
Yeah. It's human nature, almost like, I don't know, like, oh, that person's doing it incorrectly. I'm doing it correctly. I'm going to point a finger at them. But I also think, like, because the way you explained it now, I actually never thought about it that way. I don't want to say fake, but it's almost like a high-end adventure in the mountains to kind of put a little feather in your cap to say, like, ooh, I did Everest, without explaining how you did it, which is, someone did all the heavy lifting for me, and I just essentially climbed to the top in the easiest way possible. I mean, they put down the ladders, they put down the ropes. Like you said, they cook, they put the tents, they carry your oxygen. Like, they do a good chunk of the heavy lifting for you, and you kind of put, I don't know, whatever it costs, $50,000 or more, and you just can climb it up and say, oh, I did Everest. But I think because there are so many inexperienced climbers that do this with the help of the Sherpas, and because it's so lucrative, they will keep doing it. If people did it without oxygen, you would have so many more deaths. Like, in the, what do you call it, in the death zone, right above, like, I forget what it is exactly, but like there's a death zone at the top. People, if they did it without oxygen, because all those inexperienced climbers, a lot of people would probably die. No.
I mean, you could argue that, let's suppose oxygen was not allowed on Everest. Maybe there would be less death less dead people, because
people wouldn't come.
People wouldn't come, or maybe they would return earlier, or maybe they would have much more respect and come better prepared.
I could see that. Yeah, there's that famous picture, right? I think Nirmal Purja took that picture, right? Where you see this just like, I don't know, hundreds of people just on this ridge, just waiting to get to the top. It went viral because it was just like, I don't know, it's the anti of what you would think would be happening on these big mountains, like these lines at the top. It went viral, I guess, for that reason. What do you think? Did you see the? I mean, I'm sure you've heard of what he did, but did you see the documentary, the 14,000 peaks, or what's it called? 14 summits?
14 peaks, yeah. Yeah, I saw the documentary. I saw the picture of the long queue on Everest, and that's exactly what I'm not looking for. As well as I can understand all those people being in the queue. I'm very, very happy that they all climb Everest in spring and nobody is coming in the winter.
I could see that. What did you think of his feat, right? What was it? He did it in, I think the previous record was like 10 years or 12 years or something crazy. And he did it in what, like 6 months, 5 months?
I think 7 months or something like that. Yeah.
What do you think? That's pretty impressive. I mean, I saw the documentary. I was just like, I was pumped by the end of it. I was like, God damn, this guy's amazing. Like he's a very inspirational dude.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a journey into the unknown. And I mean, he didn't know if it was possible when he started it, and he didn't even have the funding. I think a very, very big part of his project success is also his ability to get the finance behind this, because he did it in a very fast style. He used big support teams, he used oxygen, he used helicopters. All that costs a lot of money. And he managed to like finance this huge project, which is a big part of the success.
So I guess do you see it as a strike against him because he used oxygen? Him and his team used oxygen?
I mean, it's just their way to do it. As I said earlier, everybody tends to criticize the other because people think their way of climbing is more pure and everybody should obey their standards. And just because I'm climbing solo, not using oxygen and support, and I do it in, let's say, for me, a very pure way, it doesn't mean that I apply these standards to others. I think mountaineering is about creativity. It's like art. There are no rules in mountaineering.
Yeah.
And so I think that project of NIMS is very creative and very well executed. It's a huge success. I think it's cool, even though he used oxygen.
So you mentioned cost for a minute. I guess it varies widely, I'm assuming, but just as a general rule of thumb, like what do these type of expeditions cost? Like it's a lot of financing, right? You have to get sponsors, you have to get people on board. Do you like that aspect of it? Like I'm assuming no, but do you like the aspect of like trying to get sponsors and all that stuff? Because I know that's a part of it, but like also on average, like what do these things cost?
Okay, I mean, it's very challenging usually to finance these expeditions. And I kind of like the challenge, but also sometimes it's just the extra work that nobody sees. You're like, everybody thinks, okay, now he's going to do this project, and you're at home stressed out because you just got a cancellation from a sponsor, and you're like, I'm not sure if this is going to work and what's going to happen. My style definitely helps, because being very minimalistic also creates a very minimalistic budget.
Yeah.
So I can do an Everest winter approach already for the cost of like a small car. So
that's not bad.
That's like a quite good price. But let's suppose, as you said, you want to climb in the spring season and you want a personal Sherpa and oxygen. Then here's the funny thing. Your cost is higher, but it's only something like $20,000 higher. Because your cost can be also lower because you share the infrastructure with so many others.
I see.
And so when I go in the winter, I have to have a permit, just like you. My permit in winter actually has a discount. So you pay around $12,000 for your permit in the normal season. Mine will be only $2,750. But with the permit, you also have to pay a government official who is joining you to watch and see that you obey the rules of the permit and the regulations. And
joining you where? On the mountain?
In the base camp. He's not like...
camp. Yeah.
So he will come to the base camp and he will check on you. And you have to pay for his journey. You have to pay his salary. And you have to pay a so-called equipment allowance that allows him to buy the equipment necessary to travel to the base camp. Because I would say most of the time, these government officials have never been to the mountains before.
Yeah.
So while you can split this part of the cost, for example, in your spring expedition with many, many other people for your expedition team, I have to pay everything by myself.
Wow, that's wild. So I mean, it's very lucrative for them. It sounds, it's areas that are probably fairly poor. I'm assuming this is probably one of their biggest income streams, like this mountaineering stuff in those areas.
So a lot of the money is taken away to Kathmandu, but a lot of the money also remains in these areas. I mean, if you imagine, I didn't check on the numbers, but I think when I first came to Nepal, the average yearly income was like $1,700. And that's like the average. So there are people earning way less than that. And you could earn a couple of $1,000s easily on an expedition. I mean, that would be like, maybe you could earn something like 3 times your usual average annual salary.
Wow.
Within 3 months, And if you do that 2 times a year, I mean, obviously this in the past was seen as a huge economic chance, and people just worked it as a job.
Have they ever been like scientifically like scrutinized, because they're just built differently, right? Like the Sherpas and the other tribes or ethnic groups in that area, because they live, I'm assuming, in high altitude their whole lives and for many, many, many generations. Like they can do things that even some of the best Westerners just aren't capable of, right?
Yeah, like for example, smoking on the summit.
That's crazy. They smoke on the summit?
They do. They also sometimes drink alcohol on the summit to just make it more interesting.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that personally, but as you said, they're built different.
Yeah, so there were research teams looking into that, and as far as I remember, was over generations of adaptation, especially the Sherpas, because they had a long high altitude exposure. They developed red blood cells that are able to bind more oxygen than ours in general. I'm not so sure if this is related only in that specific high altitude scenario. But they can also lose their acclimatization. If they go down and spend, let's say, 3 weeks or a month in Kathmandu and they come back, they can get altitude sick as well. They just get altitude sick later than we are.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought it was just kind of like a baseline. Like if you grew up there and you have, the generations that grew up there as well, like you would just have a baseline, I don't know, aptitude for altitude or whatever it is. Like you could just, yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, you do have a baseline, and that baseline is much, much higher than for most people in the world. But I mean, it doesn't mean that you can do things that you could do if you spend a long time in the high altitude. I mean, maybe they don't get sick when they go back home, but if they would, let's say, climb a little peak straight away that they would usually climb from home and feel fine, then they can already show symptoms. And then again, it depends on how hard you work out, how heavy loads you.
Are there still unclimbed mountains? Things that people have not yet summited for whatever reason?
Sure, there are still unclimbed peaks, but part of my job is to make sure it's not for long.
All right, so I guess I have a bunch of questions on that. I guess what are some of them? Is it mostly Asia? Because in the Americas, I would assume everything's been summited, right? I would assume.
So I have no clue, but I think there were still some peaks in Northern America, like Alaska and Canada, that are just so remote and so insignificant low that they're unclimbed. Like a friend of mine did a first ascent, some up there close to the Yukon Valley. Mm-hmm. But then, I mean, extreme temperatures and like, do you really want to go there for like a 3,000-foot mountain? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. So how do you approach a mountain that's never, because most mountains, there's some, there's beta, there's information, climbers before you have left. How do you approach something that's just you have zero information on?
So with time, you build some experience, and then you are able to read the landscape in a way. Do you rock climb?
Very, very little. I'm a novice.
Okay. Imagine it a bit like rock climbing. When you're outdoors, you're looking at a route, at a rock climbing route. It's a short route. Maybe it's only like 30 foot or 60 foot long route. And you are preparing and you haven't climbed the route before. Of course, there are bolts in the wall, but what you're looking for is what we call the line of weakness.
Okay.
That's where you want to climb because you think the holes are best, the conditions are best, that the best features of the rock are at that specific line. And once you start to climb harder and harder, you will be able to see those lines also in very hard routes where maybe a beginner wouldn't be able to see the line of weakness. And it's very similar with mountains and mountaineering. You see these lines where it's easier to go up than on others. And then you look at them and you weigh risk and possibility. And usually what you do in the first ascent is you go for the easiest route because you want to have a big margin for error. And usually most important thing for you is to just reach the summit. But sometimes maybe you look on a very particularly straight line. Most mountaineers and climbers would find it more appealing to climb like a water drop line. If you drop a water drop from the summit, the straight line down, it's what they call a direttissima down here in the Alps.
Which is what?
Which is a direct line. It's the most direct line to the summit. That's something you could attempt. And then again, if you wanted to do that, you would look for weaknesses. You would look for features that you could see with binoculars that you think will be possible for a climb, and then you go and check.
What's your biggest fear? Doesn't necessarily have to be on like a first summit, but just generally on the mountains, like, is it avalanches? Is it high winds? Is it, I don't know, rocks falling or crevasses? Like, do you have one thing that is like, oh shit, like I have to avoid this at all costs? Obviously, all of these things you would like to avoid, but is there like one thing more than others?
I think just in general, there is a specific fear that is more encoded into us humans than others. And I think that's the fear of falling. It's just like a very natural thing not to want to fall because you want to survive.
I like to live personally. I would rather not fall, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that's the primary fear. And I mean, it could be also falling into a crevasse, but just this, I mean, I do lots of soloing. And here's the funny thing. When I actually free solo a route, I'm not afraid of falling because the falling is like really far away. I know falling is not an option. If I fall, I die. Mm-hmm. But if I'm climbing with a rope partner and a rope and I hammer in some pitons, which are like little metal things you hammer into cracks and you clip your carabiners in them, or I put in mobile protection, which is protection I can put in cracks that I can remove later on. Okay. So you can imagine it more like, like a door stopper. You put it under the door and it keeps the door open. Mm-hmm. We have something like that with a wire attached, but we put it in like rock cracks, and so it gets jammed there. And if you fall, it jams even more, mm-hmm. and so it stops your fall. So if I'm climbing in, let's say, a high wall, then I have a belayer who has a belaying device. He will be also hanging in the wall. And then I start climbing when we are connected via the rope. The rope runs through his device. And on the way up, I clip the rope into carabiners that are in the wall, like attached to something. Either I place it there or there's something already there. And now imagine I'm like maybe a 9 foot above the last placement.
Yeah.
If I fall now, I don't fall 9 foot. I would fall at least 18 foot because it's double, or because I'm above that, and we have some rope stretch, and it's already some flight time.
Yeah.
And even though maybe the placement is good and nothing happens to me, this can be quite scary because you're actually facing the potential fall all the time. But when I'm soloing, this thought is somehow not there, you know?
Yeah. I mean, 18, you can definitely shatter a shoulder or a leg or something, like because that velocity when you hit the wall at the bottom, if it's like hard rock, you could definitely jam something up, right?
No, actually, this is like a total harmless fall because the rope is so stretchy. Probably nothing happens to you. If you're not a total idiot, you nothing happens to you.
You're serious?
Yeah, this is like, it's just scary. I mean, but the rope is very elastic, and you pull your climbing partner a little bit up also. So the system absorbs a lot of energy. And so if you fall 18 foot, it's just scary, but it's like kind of a standard fall, I would say.
Yeah, and you have to trust the equipment.
That's the other thing. Sometimes I'm thinking, what happens if the rope, I don't know, gets cut, or what happens if the piece of protection rips out of the wall, and then suddenly it's not 18 feet, then it's like 30, you know, and then you're more thinking, okay, now I can get some momentum and maybe swing wrong in the wall or something.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. That's some scary shit. Earlier I kind of roughly mentioned Messner. What's your beef with Messner? Why you guys should be BFF? Why you guys fighting?
I told you, I mean, I have no beef with Messner, but the mountaineering world is more like, it's unfortunately often not like a team. It's more like envy and saying, oh, what this guy is doing is not according to my personal standards, so it's not good enough.
What's his issue?
I think...
For people who may not know, Messner is one of the, godfathers of mountaineering. He was the first to, I don't know if he's the first to summit all the highest peaks, all the 14 highest peaks, is he?
He's the first to summit all of the 14 peaks, and he's the first to summit the 14 peaks without oxygen.
Okay.
And he also did the first ascent of Everest with no oxygen together with his climbing partner, Peter Habler. So they both together were the first to climb Everest without oxygen. Before they did it, doctors believed it was impossible for the human body to survive this.
Wow. And he did it, proved everyone wrong. You know, he's a legend in the sports. I would think he would be supporting the younger generation that is trying to do things that people are saying it can't be done, right? Because that's essentially what he did. You're just kind of following in his footsteps. Like, what's the issue?
Oof. I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know. Funny thing is, we talked about the project of NIMS, Nirmal Puja. You mentioned earlier, the guy who climbed these 14 peaks in 7 months, used oxygen, all that support. Now, somehow he supported this project done by NIMS. Mm-hmm. But here's the funny thing. If a Westerner would have done it, Messner would have criticized that person really hardly for using all that support, all the helicopters, all the oxygen, and so on. Now a Nepali did it, and it's different. And I think it's very similar with the project I do. I think it would look much better if I was a young Pakistani or Nepali trying this impossible project, going back to the roots, going for this real alpinism. But as I am a Westerner, I don't know, maybe he feels challenged by me because I'm doing this incredibly hard project. I'm basically, I don't know, trying to do something that I think is alpinism in my personal definition. And I'm talking a lot about it. And I think what he doesn't like most is that I'm talking a lot about it because he feels like I'm not delivering on what I'm talking about.
That's a little hypocritical. I mean, we can only control what we can control, and we can only, you want to live to tell about these feats. No one wants to die doing these things. You want to be, as far away from death as possible. So I don't know. It just seems a little, and again, I don't even know the full story. I don't want to like shit on Messner by any means. He's a legend, but it just seems a tad hypocritical from his point of view. It sounds almost like it's a little political. Like a touch
I don't know.
Political.
Maybe I'm a threat, but if this is the case, I'm honored. I'm thankful. Thank you, Messner, for this criticism. I really appreciate it. And I have to say, if somebody who managed to establish himself like nobody else worldwide as a brand like Messner is saying, I'm doing a good PR, then it's a huge compliment. And that's what he's essentially saying. He says, the PR of Kobusch is really good, but he's not delivering. And his Instagram followers, they don't know what he's really doing and so on, blah, blah, blah. I mean, if he's criticizing me in this way, I'm just like, that's such a huge compliment.
Have you had the chance to talk to him?
I haven't, but a friend of mine was there for an interview.
Okay.
And they had this interview and so on. And in the interview, they asked Messner, and that's the story how I was told it, if he was ever on Instagram. And he said, yes, once. And so my friend, the journalist, asked, so Messner, what did you do on Instagram? And he said, of course, I was looking for the Kobusch, because he was like criticizing.
So you really get under his skin.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, this Kobusch, he's just like, I think this is also a completely different generation. He didn't have all this social media and so on. And I mean, this is just the new way to do it. I'm not an influencer. I'm an alpinist who is using modern means of communication to make this expedition work, to make it work according to modern standards. Of course, I was inspired by what Messner did. Like the PR he did is amazing. Just there was no social media in there, and so it maybe, I mean, it's natural then to criticize my social media activity while I'm on the mountain. This is an element Messner wasn't using before, and interestingly, Messner the same was criticized by the previous generations as well for being so bold in the media like I am now,
Yeah. But I think now it's part and parcel with being, look, whatever, like you don't have someone paying you a salary. You're independent, you're doing what you love. And in order to make a living off of it, there's certain things you have to do. And promoting yourself on social media, I think that's just what everyone, like, maybe older generation doesn't understand it, but it's just, that's standard today. Anybody that has a passion for something and wants to do what they want to do, which is that thing, and also make a living off of it, that's the way you do it nowadays. It's just the way it is. And it's great. I think it's amazing. I think the fact that you can do what you love doing, make a salary off of it, make a living off of it. Some even get very rich off of it. That's amazing. Well, that's the best thing in the world.
Yeah. I mean, again, now maybe after all this talking, you might think I'm taking this criticism, I don't know, it's hard and so on, but actually, whenever I receive criticism, then
it fuels you.
It kind of fuels me, yeah. Like, I prefer the kind of criticism David gave me with the 0.1% chance to reach 6,000, because that's very detailed criticism. That's really, I can work with that. But if Messner just says, I don't like, I think you're doing PR alpinism, you're just talking, but you don't have a chance at the summit, it's harder to work with it,
Yeah.
But, I would print these headlines and put it in my training room for the weight training and just always look at them,
Look, man, everyone fuels themselves differently. Some people need the constant adulation, like, oh, you're the best, you can do it. And then some people need dude, you suck, you're never going to make it, you can't do it. So whatever fuels you, whatever gets you up in the morning out of bed when it's, 20 degrees or 20 Fahrenheit, when it's whatever, -5 Celsius, whatever you need, man. Just it worked. Everything. There was a story a while back where some guy he lost. Well, it was in stones. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was like hundreds of pounds, like over a year. And it was a fun. Like his friend messaged him every day, "You fat fuck, you need to get skinny," and this helped him. And he lost hundreds of pounds. He went from being obese to being like normal, you know, like, I don't know, 150, 180, 200, whatever. So yeah, whatever works for you, man.
Crazy. So this is actually not what fuels me. It's just like sometimes it's just funny, you know. What really fuels me is my curiosity. So when I go out there and I don't really know what's up there and I don't really know my personal limitations and what I'm capable of as an athlete, then that's what I'm really there to find out. And if I'm up on the mountain and it's hard and I'm suffering really hard, then the criticism of Messner is the last thing I think about. Then it's really, I want to see what's up there. I want to see what's around the corner, what's at places that I've never reached, that I have no information about. And that's what really fuels me.
Is there like a meditative aspect to climbing, to being in the mountains? Because, you know, I feel like whenever safety is not what makes you feel alive. You know what I mean? Like when there's a chance of death or serious bodily harm, I think that's when we feel like the most alive, right? When we're out in the mountains. For you, it's maybe mountains. For others, it could be kayaking or whatever it is, whatever you're into. But whenever there's a chance of that something could happen to you, that you could be physically injured or maybe even die in the worst case scenario, that's kind of like when we feel the most alive, weirdly enough, right? That's at least how I kind of see it. But like, is there like a meditative thing that you go through, or just like those moments when you're out there, is, you know, that addictive feeling when you do feel the most alive?
I think what's really addictive for me is when I come back home and the suffering stops and I have suddenly, in an instant, I have all this comfort again. And that's just so amazing, this feeling, you know, even if I don't summit, you know, I come back from this hardship, from this hard time, and suddenly I see these details. I see this very nice toilet at home, and I like to sit on it, and I have this nice bed that I took for granted before, and I'm under the shower, and it's like all these things, and it just makes me appreciate them. And I think that true happiness comes from this appreciation. And when you do a really hard expedition, this appreciation lasts really long, and I think that's really an addictive component of it.
So you think in the West we have it too good, or maybe not in the West, in a good chunk of the world we have it too good, and this is just a reminder of, hey, like, nature is brutal, life's hard, we should appreciate what we have, the modernity, the ease, the convenience.
I think it's a reminder of what we have that we took for granted before.
Yeah.
Life is good, but we often don't see it. We often take things for granted. And stripping them all away really makes you realize what you have.
Yeah, no, it's very true. What do you have any future, other than the 2022, 2023 Everest bid, but any other?
Wait, it's 23, 24.
Sorry, my bad. 23, 24. Do you have any other big future, you know, projects kind of in mind that you can share?
So I think I want to come to the States coming winter to climb something.
Come to Colorado.
Yeah, I want to go something more extreme, you know.
Colorado's the highest. I mean, California is technically the highest, but yeah.
So I've already been in Denver. Last time I was trying that project. It will be also a second try. But my stay in Denver usually lasts like maybe 3 hours. And then I take another flight up to Alaska.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, Alaska's got the big boys.
Exactly. So I have a winter project up there. I tried it already once, but I was very unlucky. Um, you know, it was the time when Trump was having this argument about the budget, and they shut down the whole country. If you remember,
Shut down the country? What do you mean?
like you guys shut down all governmental services. It was this the U.S. shutdown. I think 2000. I don't remember 17 or something. So it was this argument with Trump wanting to build his wall down to Mexico, and there was no budget for that. And so because Trump didn't approve the final US budget, many parts of the country completely shut down, like national parks shut down, like only military border services and something else was running, like everything for national security, but every other government employee was forbidden from work. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the government employees that should have their briefing with me at the Denali National Park weren't allowed to have the briefing. So I was stuck there for a month. And I couldn't really climb Denali. I did some other climbs in Alaska. I mean, it's super cold. That's when I learned that minus 40 Fahrenheit is the same than minus 40 Celsius, because that was like the usual daily temperature.
Yeah. Wait, you tried to do Denali in winter?
Exactly.
Oh, well, that's hard.
So next winter, I'm going for Denali winter, second try.
Have people summited Denali in winter?
Yeah, a handful. Less than Everest.
Less than Everest in winter?
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, Alaska is brutal, man. Like I mean, I'm sure Everest is as well, but fucking Alaska, though, the weather there is harsh, really, really harsh. I wish you the best of luck, man. If you come into Colorado, we can do a little 14er just as a preparation. A little 14er, a small one.
Acclimatization.
Exactly. Well, Jost, thank you so much for your time, man. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was cool to talk to you, Roy.
What are the best places? Where are you most active on social media? Where can people find you?
I'm very active on Instagram and Facebook, and I do have a website. It's Jost, Jost, Kobusch, Kobusch. That's my last name. .com.
And you're actively like letting people know about your future, climbs and everything, right? There's like a place people can follow all that stuff, right?
So if you're on my website and I'm on expedition, there's usually a live tracking where I have a satellite beacon with me and you can follow the expedition live and the progress. Whenever I'm on Everest, we even have that as a cool feature in 3D. Like you can it's like a Everest model, and it's like better than Google Earth.
Wow, that's awesome.
So that's a good place if you go on the website. Otherwise, whenever there is something to announce, it's usually written on Instagram. Check out the Instagram and don't hesitate to drop me a message. I reply all of my messages. It might take a while depending on how many of you guys are writing at the same time, but I do have this policy that I really try to reply to every message.
That's awesome, man. A lot of people don't. So that's really cool of you. Guys, go follow him. And again, Jost, thanks so much for your time today. This was very informative, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me too. It was cool to be here.
All right. Take care, buddy.
Bye.